It happened on a Tuesday. Tom was driving home from work when the call came, short, panicked, and hard to understand. Jeff's car. Off the bridge, they can't find him. He pulled over, hands shaking on the wheel. For a few seconds, he just sat there, engine running, trying to process the words. Jeff, his best friend since high school. His brother in everything but blood. By the time he reached the scene, the flashing lights were already fading. A tow truck stood by the riverbank. They'd pulled the car out, twisted and silent. No body found. Someone from the sheriff's office said, "They'll keep searching in the morning." Tom nodded, though he barely heard. That night he sat in Jeff's kitchen with Anna, Jeff's wife. The two of them said almost nothing. The smell of her tea filled the room, steady and soft. At some point she whispered. They said the current was strong. He wanted to say something comforting, but nothing felt real enough. So he just said, "We'll wait. Maybe morning will bring news." But deep down, both of them already knew morning wouldn't change anything. The funeral was small. No body, no casket, just a framed photo on a wooden table, a few flowers, and people who didn't know what to say. Tom stood near the back, hands clasped in front of him. He'd been to plenty of funerals before, but this one felt wrong. Empty in a way that didn't make sense. Anna sat in the first row. She didn't cry. She just stared at the picture, Jeff in his uniform, smiling alive. The kind of photo people choose when they still believe the person will walk through the door any minute. Afterward, people offered the usual words, "Sorry for your loss. He was a good man. Time will heal." Tom said them too, though they sounded hollow even to him. When the others left, he stayed to help her gather the flowers. "You should rest," he said. She nodded but didn't move. "It doesn't feel real," she whispered. He didn't answer. He just carried the last bouquet to her car, then stood there for a moment, not knowing whether to leave. She looked up finally. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I wouldn't be anywhere else." And somehow, that simple truth was the only thing that felt right. In the weeks that followed, Tom found reasons to stop by Anna's house. At first, they were practical, fixing a leaking faucet, checking the furnace, mowing the lawn. Things Jeff would have done without thinking. Anna never asked him to, but she never stopped him either. She always thanked him the same way, quiet voice, small smile, a cup of coffee before he left. He told himself he was just helping, nothing more. That's what friends do. But even he knew that helping wasn't the full truth. There was something about the house, the stillness of it, the half-folded laundry, the coffee mugs left from when Jeff was alive. It all felt frozen, like time had chosen to pause there. Sometimes they'd sit for a while in the kitchen after he finished a job. She'd ask about his work, he'd ask about her garden. Ordinary talk. But the way she listened, really listened, was different. One evening, as he was leaving, she said, "It's easier when someone else is here." He nodded, hands in his pockets. "Yeah, I get that." And as he drove home, he realized he hadn't turned on the radio the whole way. The silence didn't bother him this time. Spring came slow that year. The snow melted into muddy lawns, the river swelled, and the days finally stretched past dinner time. Anna started leaving the curtains open again. She planted flowers out front, the same ones Jeff used to forget to water. When Tom stopped by, the house no longer smelled of dust and silence. It smelled like coffee and something cooking. He still told himself he came to help, but it wasn't really about that anymore. He'd sit at her kitchen table, boots still muddy, and she'd tell him about the little things, the new neighbors, a letter from her sister, the cat that kept showing up by the porch. He'd listen, nodding, sometimes smiling. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even something either of them could name. It was just two people learning how to be less alone. One afternoon, she said, "You don't have to keep checking on me, you know." He answered without thinking, "I know, but I don't mind." She looked at him then, really looked, and said quietly, "I know that too." It wasn't a beginning, but it was no longer just an ending either. A year later, almost to the day, Anna asked if he'd drive her to the bridge. It wasn't a plan. She just said it one afternoon while watering the plants, like mentioning an errand. "I think I need to go there," she said. Tom nodded. "I'll take you." The river looked different in spring sunlight. Quieter. The guardrails had been repaired, new ones replacing the twisted metal. But for both of them, it was still the same place. They stood by the edge for a long time without speaking. A few wildflowers grew where the car had gone off the road. Anna crouched down and set a small bouquet beside them. "I thought I'd never come back here," she said softly. "But now it just feels calm." Tom nodded. "Maybe that's what time does." She looked up at him, her eyes tired but clear. "Thank you for not letting me go through it alone." He wanted to tell her that he hadn't really done anything, that he needed her company just as much. But instead he just said, "You don't have to thank me." On the way home, the silence between them felt lighter than it had in a long time. That evening, when they got back from the bridge, Anna asked if he wanted to stay for dinner. It wasn't the first time she'd offered, but this time it sounded different, quieter, more certain. "Sure," Tom said, "if you got enough." She smiled. "I always make too much." He helped her slice vegetables, moving around her small kitchen like he'd done it 100 times before. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the air. She hummed something under her breath, an old tune he didn't recognize. They ate by the window, no candles, no wine, just 2 plates and a soft light from the lamp. She asked about his week, his work. He asked about the garden. It was ordinary. That was what made it feel so safe. When he stood to leave, she walked him to the door. "Thank you for today," she said. He nodded. "You don't have to thank me." "I know," she said, her voice steady now. "But I still want to." For a moment, neither moved. Then she smiled, small and tired, and closed the door. And for the first time in a year, Tom realized he didn't feel like a visitor anymore. After that evening, Tom started stopping by more often. Sometimes on weekends, sometimes after work. No reason, no plan. He'd bring small things, groceries she forgot to buy, a light bulb for the porch, batteries for the radio. She'd roll her eyes and say, "You don't need to fix everything." And he'd just smile. Old habits. He didn't notice when it stopped feeling like checking in. It became something else, a quiet part of his week he looked forward to. Even on the days he didn't see her, he'd think about whether she'd remembered to eat, whether the new roof held through the rain. They talked more now, about work, the past, the things they both missed. Once she said, "Jeff used to make fun of me for keeping all the curtains open." Tom smiled. "Yeah, he said you let the whole neighborhood see your mess." She laughed, a soft sound that made something inside him unclench. Later that night, driving home, he caught himself smiling for no reason. He told himself it was just friendship, the kind built from shared loss. But deep down, he knew friendship didn't feel quite like this. One Friday evening, she called and asked if he could come by. "Nothing's wrong," she said quickly. "I just don't feel like eating alone." He brought takeout, Chinese, the kind Jeff used to hate, and they ate straight from the boxes at the kitchen counter. It was raining outside, steady and quiet, tapping against the windows. They talked for hours about things that didn't matter. Work, music, old TV shows. She teased him for never taking a vacation. He teased her for still watching the same soap opera she used to watch with Jeff. At some point, she laughed so hard she had to wipe her eyes. It startled both of them. Not the laugh itself, but the sound of it. It had been missing for too long. Tom looked at her then, really looked, and felt something shift inside him. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, just a small realization that he liked seeing her happy. Later, as he helped her wash the dishes, their hands brushed once, quick and accidental. Neither said anything. But when he drove home that night, the silence in the car felt different. Not heavy, not empty. Just full of something new he didn't dare name. The next morning, Tom woke earlier than usual. He made coffee, stood by the window, and caught himself smiling at nothing. Then he stopped, the kind of sudden stillness that comes when you realize where your thoughts have gone. He tried to push it away, told himself it was just friendship, gratitude, routine. But it didn't sound convincing, even in his own head. He thought about the way she'd laughed the night before, how her hand had brushed his. It was small, meaningless, yet somehow not. He set the coffee cup down, hard enough to spill a few drops. "Come on, Tom," he muttered. "Don't start that." The guilt hit fast and clean. Jeff's face flashed in his mind, not as a ghost, but as a friend, a man who'd trusted him. They'd been through everything together, college, jobs, marriages, loss. And now here he was, thinking about the one person Jeff had loved most. Tom leaned on the counter, closed his eyes. He wasn't angry with himself, just tired. because deep down he knew it wasn't something he'd planned. It was something that had quietly happened while he was busy doing the right thing. For the next few weeks, Tom kept his distance. He stopped dropping by on weekdays, stopped answering her texts right away. When she called, he always had a reason: work, errands, a headache. Each excuse sounded harmless, but together they built a quiet wall. Anna noticed. When they finally crossed paths at the grocery store, she smiled like nothing was wrong, but her eyes gave her away. "Haven't seen you in a while," she said, voice light. "Been busy," he replied. Too quick, too short. They stood near the produce section, two people pretending to be strangers in a place too ordinary for the truth. Later that night, she left a message on his phone. "I don't know what happened," she said. "If I said something, I'm sorry. I just miss our talks." He listened to it twice, then deleted it. Not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. That night, sleep wouldn't come. He kept hearing her voice in the dark. Not the words, just the tone. Gentle, a little hurt. By morning, he realized distance didn't fix anything. It only made the silence louder. He showed up at her door on a Sunday afternoon. No warning, no plan, just a quiet knock and the sound of rain starting to fall again. Anna opened the door, surprised but calm. "Hey," she said softly. "Didn't think I'd see you." "Yeah," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "Didn't think so either." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." He did. The house smelled the same. Coffee, wood polish, a faint trace of her perfume. He stood by the table, searching for words. "I've been stupid," he said finally. "Trying to do the right thing. Whatever that means." She tilted her head. "And what's the right thing?" He looked at her then, tired, honest. "I thought it was staying away, but it just feels like lying." She didn't answer right away. She just nodded slowly, her eyes soft. "I don't know what this is, Tom," she said. "I just know it's real. That's all I've got." He nodded, the weight in his chest easing a little. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's all I got too." And in that simple truth, something unspoken settled between them. Fragile, but finally real. After that day, things changed quietly, not overnight, but like the slow turn of season. He started coming by again, not out of duty this time, but because he wanted to. They didn't talk about what was happening between them. There was no confession, no plan, no label. Just long evenings, soft laughter, the comfort of someone who knew your silences as well as your words. One night, she fell asleep on the couch beside him while they were watching a movie. He turned off the TV, pulled a blanket over her, and for a moment just sat there, watching her breathe. He should have left then. He knew that. Instead, he stayed. When she opened her eyes, she didn't look surprised. She just reached out, found his hand, and whispered, "You don't have to go." He didn't. It wasn't passion, not the kind people talk about. It was quieter, like two lives finally exhaling after too long holding their breath. For the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. They both knew it couldn't last. But for that night, pretending it could felt almost like peace. The call came on a Thursday morning. Tom was at work, sorting through invoices, when his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Walker," the voice said. "This is Officer Reynolds from the State Police. I'm calling about your friend, Jeffrey Miller." Tom froze. "What about him?" The officer hesitated, then continued. "He was located this morning. He's alive." The rest of the words blurred together. Something about an accident, memory loss, long-term care, recovery. Tom heard them, but they didn't make sense. When he hung up, his hands were trembling. For a long time, he just sat there, staring at the wall. That evening, he drove to Anna's house. She opened the door, smiling faintly. "You look like you've seen a ghost." He swallowed hard. "Anna, it's Jeff." Her smile faded. "What about him?" "He's alive." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and unreal. She didn't speak. She just stood there, one hand gripping the doorframe, her breath unsteady. Then very quietly she said, "Oh my God." And for the first time since the accident, neither of them knew which of them had just lost everything. The hospital was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort. Tom walked down the long corridor, counting his steps because it was easier than thinking. When he reached the room, the door was half open. Jeff sat by the window in a wheelchair, thin and pale, staring outside. The same broad shoulders, the same hairline, but older now, worn down. Tom hesitated in the doorway. "Hey," he said softly. Jeff turned. For a second his eyes searched, uncertain, then lit up with faint recognition. "Tom." "Yeah," he said, trying to smile. "It's me." Jeff exhaled, a sound between a sigh and a laugh. "Didn't think I'd ever see you again." "Same here." They talked a little about recovery, about how he'd been found wandering miles from the crash. Jeff remembered almost nothing after the accident. "Guess I got a second shot," he said, looking out the window. "Feels strange." Tom nodded. His throat tightened. He wanted to tell him everything, the whole impossible truth, but the words wouldn't come. Jeff turned back to him. "You okay?" Tom forced a small smile. "Yeah, just glad you're here, man." And in that moment, it was both the truth and the biggest lie of his life. When Tom got to her house that night, she was sitting in the kitchen, lights off, cup of tea untouched in front of her. He stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure if he should even speak. "I saw him," he said finally. She looked up slowly. "How is he?" "Alive," Tom said. "Tired. Doesn't remember much. But he's here." Anna nodded, her hands wrapped around the cup, though it had long gone cold. Neither of them spoke for a while. The clock ticked. The rain tapped the window. Sounds that used to feel safe now only filled the silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "He'll need me." Tom nodded. "Yeah. And you?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. "Doesn't matter." She shook her head. "It does." He looked at her then, really looked, the same woman who had learned to smile again, laugh again, breathe again. And now she'd have to start all over. He wanted to tell her that he loved her, that what they had was real, even if it couldn't stay. But all he said was, "Take care of him." She nodded, eyes shining. "And you take care of yourself." Neither said goodbye. They didn't need to. A week later, Tom went back to the hospital. Jeff was still recovering, stronger now, walking short distances with a cane, joking with the nurses. He looked more like himself again. Tom carried an envelope in his jacket pocket. Nothing dramatic, just a folded letter and a small photo of the three of them from years ago, smiling at a barbecue. They talked for a while, the way old friends do when they're trying not to touch the real subjects. Work, the weather, baseball. When it was time to leave, Tom reached for Jeff's hand and pressed the envelope into it. "There's something I've been meaning to give you," he said quietly. "Read it when you're ready." Jeff looked at him, puzzled. "What is it?" Tom smiled faintly. "Just a few things I never said." He turned to go before Jeff could ask more. Outside, the air was cool, the late sun stretching long shadows across the parking lot. He took a deep breath, feeling both lighter and emptier than he'd expected. Some truths didn't need explanations. They just needed to be left behind, gently and for good.